will. I
way.
will.
Great.
I'll do that first.
Great. Perfect. Let's make sure.
Go for it.
Going.
Okay, so are we on air?
The preview is running.
Okay.
That's all right. We can talk through it. It's just music.
So Chant Hannah's, hold on, yeah, Chant's not...
Yeah, she had something come up, so we're just going to roll.
So,
Show must go on, baby.
Yeah. How long do we talk for today? Hour?
Yeah. And good evening from Philadelphia. Frank here with another episode of UFO News Network Sunday. Chant had something come up, so she's not going to make it tonight, which gives me the opportunity to introduce something normally Chant wants to do. She doesn't want me introducing guests, but I'm going to get to do it tonight. I get to introduce Paul Dean, back to the show, becoming a semi-regular here. Thanks, Paul, for joining us, and we want to get through this quick, but you got a lot of good stuff for us. Thanks for coming back on. I appreciate it.
Hi, how's it going?
Busy, as you well know.
Yeah, so am I. Yeah, this was a last-minute one. I had Chant got me to work out a time if I could come on, and here we are.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I know we were kind of blocked up over the last 3 days with this Admiral Wilson document, and I know you wanted to make some comment on that, so I'd love to hear from you on that.
Yeah, this is a very, very, very complex piece of record. I'd heard about this before, like years and years and years ago, and there's nothing else other than you just hear a story, like there's this lengthy record between a scientist and an admiral who some people said it was Wilson, some people said they didn't know if it was Wilson, and I never thought anything of it at all. It's so vague to me now that, but anyway, then it comes out and the some people look. Everyone's got a different reaction. Like some people are giddy like schoolgirls over this. Some people are treating it with disdain, and everywhere in between. But one thing that I found, I started going through because the biggest problem for me was I'm thinking with these notes, even if they're real, were these notes recorded from a dictaphone? Like is the implication that Eric Davis actually recorded this via a microphone or a dictaphone, and then later transcribed it virtually word for word, put his own comments in, like notes, like abbreviations and so on? And that's one scenario. The other scenario is that he did it all from memory, like, that night or a few days later. Right. And that, of course, would introduce problems, especially when you've got 15 pages worth of very complex material, very, lengthy names, lengthy acronyms, dates, and so on. And, the implication to me, it looks like it was done very quickly after the event, and hopefully, to me it looks like it seemed to have been done from a microphone. Now, what all those involved, or in this case...
Now, Paul, I want to jump in here and say, if accurate, if it was just somebody concocting something, they can do it at their convenience whenever they wanted.
Yeah, exactly. So, if it was concocted from scratch, like a traditional fraudulent record, then it could take them years. Now, I went through it. I've read it really well twice now, and it is the more the more you read it, the more you realise how sort of complex it is. I mean, there is so many names to look up. Contractors and various directors, program managers, even there's remote viewers that are named. It's a really big job, and you assume that. I mean, the source is the implication here has been that Grant Cameron, the Canadian researcher, has had this record for a while and has been trying to work on it. You would think that he or Mr. Hall that you had on yesterday have done some of that. I went through it from a bit of a different angle. I thought I've read it properly twice, and I've already found a few pretty big problems. And I don't know if they're just sort of minor sort of clerical errors, or if they imply something that would point to being fraudulent. One of them is on page 7. There's a footnote down at the bottom. It's just a little footnote, and its exact words are Judith Daly, Assistant Deputy Under Secretary of Defence for Advanced Development, OUSDAT. Now, the first problem with that is there's actually no such place. It's not, because the person who wrote this document has written Assistant Deputy Under Secretary of Defence. The actual proper title is Deputy Assistant Under Secretary of Defence. They've got the deputy and the assistant the wrong way around, and that might be okay.
Yeah, that seems like it could be a reasonable mistake.
It could be. The only problem is if you read the next bit where it says for advanced development, i.e. Assistant Deputy Under Secretary for Defence for Advanced Development, then you read the acronym OUSDAT. That doesn't say that. Advanced Development would be AD. The acronym that's been given here is AT, which I think would be Advanced Technology. So that whole line has two problems, which, most likely that is just a simple rushed error. I don't know though, but there's more. On page 12, there's this discrepancy in that apparently Admiral Wilson was shown the bigot list, and it says it was several pages long. Right, dated early 90s. The bigot list for this apparent secret UFO program was several pages long. Now, several means 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. Right, but then later, just the next page, page 13, Wilson purportedly says that there are 400 to 800 names listed, right, in this bigot list. Now, you can't fit, say, 400, 5, 6, 7, 800 names. You can't fit that on several pages. Like, if you can fit 30 or 40 names on a page, it just doesn't add up. I mean, if you were going to fit, say, 800 names on a page, it's going to be many. It's
going to be a booklet. It's going to be a booklet, not a few pages of paper.
Few. And the other thing is why such the wide range? I mean, 4 to 800 is like 100% discrepancy. That's like a doubling. Again, it may not be a problem, but I don't know. The other thing is that there's one part that doesn't add up to me that well is that these purported secret program contractors, did they meet with Wilson at all? And I mean, they weren't military men or even government officials, but they're private contractors. So Admiral Wilson can't really be ordering them around. They supposedly showed Wilson that he was not on their bigot list. Fair enough. So they actually shouldn't have been talking to him or meeting with him at all. Now, you might say, look, being a deputy at the time, he was deputy director for the DIA. He was a 4-star admiral, or maybe he was a 3-star then, but he was certainly 3 or 4-star flag officer, and he was deeply embedded within the intelligence and security community. You would sort of think that he should have sort of his need to know should be there almost no matter what. But maybe it doesn't work like that. I mean, maybe they shouldn't have been talking to him, and they just felt they should. Like, I don't know. Someone needs to be able to ask the question of a very senior officer. Within your area, within your realm, can you sort of be chucked on the need to know list or the bigot list like very, very, very quickly to have access to anything? Now, maybe it doesn't work like that. We've heard of special compartmentalized information. We've heard of stovepipes and SAPs. We've heard of being briefed in and briefed out, whatever. But now I've only gone through this document twice, and I've already found these problems, and I would suspect that there are probably a whole bunch more. is the people have even said, is the document real? I got it, like, as in, was it actually penned by Eric Davis after his meeting? I think it probably is real. There's just something about it. My gut instinct would say it's probably is a real record, not something that was cooked up in someone's basement for fun. Yeah.
Okay. Now, do you think, when I looked through it the first time, what I was looking for was sort of the tropes, the plot devices of known AFOSI disinformation.
Sure.
And when I saw the what was listed as Miller's particular interest, they didn't sound to me like the type of cases that somebody in Miller's position would have been interested in. And that was a key question I wanted to ask him right away was, are you interested in these cases? And he professed very little knowledge or interest at all in the Socorro case. So that struck me as a bit of a red flag because that is a case that has been used in past AFOSI disinformation. So that's why that was the key question I wanted to ask him. Of course, I asked him about the letter, but his answer was, he couldn't remember off the top of his head. I wouldn't have expected him to. That would have been a reasonable answer. And then the way we left our conversations was, is it okay if I follow up with you? He said, fine. But Chant wanted to follow up the next day, and she did. And she got her questions in. And basically, he went on to say that as well, he has never had any dealings with any kind of recovered ET technology, anything along those lines. So that's where that was left. But yeah, obviously, we want to get a lot of eyes on this sort of thing and get a lot of people looking at it. I mean, first off, I had no reasonable expectation of being able to contact Miller, and when he returned my call, I was shocked as I could possibly be. I didn't expect the guy to get back to me. But here's somebody who's really tied in with these documents, who has actually responded to some questions, and we're getting nobody else saying anything. So we don't know exactly where it's at. To me right now, is we've raised some legitimate questions. What the proponents really have to do is, at the very least, at some point in time, you're going to have to contact Admiral Wilson, and you're going to have to find out, okay, let's say this is true. He's not going to say it's true. He's not going to say all these things actually happened. But what you can do is you've got to prove that he was in Las Vegas on the date. If you can't do that, and you should be able to do that. You should be able to do that.
There's a bit of a problem with that because Davis left his directorship of the DIA in 2000, like in the July. This meeting,
Wilson, not Davis.
Sorry. Wilson left. Wilson was relieved of his directorship, like his head honcho position of the DIA.
Yeah, he's retired at the point of the alleged meeting.
Yeah. So what I was thinking, my first reaction was actually to submit an FOI request to the DIA for the day-to-day meeting and briefing and trip records for Admiral Wilson, and then we'd find out, if it wasn't classified or if they could actually even find them, because it's a little old now, this stuff. If potentially we could find out where he was at certain times. There is one other thing. As for the Air Force, you mentioned disinformation. There was one thing that did jump out at me. You'll notice that an Air Force H. Marshall Ward, I think it might be Herbert, I'm not sure, but it's an H. Marshall Ward who was a 3 or 4 star general in the Air Force. He was the one that steered Wilson towards Office of the Undersecretary of Defense Records. Thus, you could say that he was steering Wilson away from what I would call other forms of UFO information, like Air Force generated UFO information. So if Wilson had have gone to the Air Force General and said, I want to talk to you about, UFOs generally, the Air Force General would potentially steer him towards NORAD, like Air Force dominated NORAD, the Air Force Space Track System, old Blue Book files, whatever. But the general steered him towards Undersecretary of Defense. Office of the Secretary of Defense Records, and I don't think that may mean that much, but it's something that just did jump out at me. Now, one thing that is curious about all this is how these actually came out. Now, I believe that they were on. I'm not good with these websites. I can't even pronounce them, but Imagu or something. I know
Imgur, I
that.
think. I don't know.
Um,
I know how to
okay.
spell it. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Well, like, I don't even know what a Reddit is, but I know that I think it was Teresa Tyndall, who's I think a researcher in your neck of the woods, said that she thought she was the first one to find them on that Imagu or whatever it is, and then other people found them quite rapidly on Reddit and whatever. And I know that Keith Basterfield has just done a blog about sort of like the order of how things came out, and I'd be really curious to see who actually leaked them, because all we've got is anonymous handles, like these anonymous handles of who sort of put them on the web potentially for the first time. And you want to ask these people, why did, not so much when did they leak them or how or what, but you want to ask them why, like what purpose, and were they told to, or were they given permission, or did they do it from another country on another, like using someone else's handle, whatever, because that potentially could be interesting. But if you go back, all I know is, look, when I read this document, it is quite complex, and the biggest question to me is how accurately was it all recorded down, because that means everything. I mean, if there was significant errors in there that I can't find or no one can find, and then we don't know, we just don't know how accurate any of it is. But for the people who say that it's probably literally a fake document cooked up by a Timothy Cooper like entity or a Bill Moore type entity, I don't think that's right. I think we're looking at something that is relatively genuine.
Okay. Well, you've looked for the holes in it. Are you looking for any kind of actionable leads?
Yeah, the mention. Well, I mean, FOI with the Office of the Secretary of Defence and the Joint Chiefs and the Undersecretaries, it is staggeringly slow at the moment, and it's just sodden in classification. I mean, even like there are leads as far as the special access program lists. There's leads with the Undersecretary of Advanced Technology, or the Deputy Assistant Record, or sorry, I should say, Deputy Assistant Records, the Undersecretary of Advanced Technology, or if it was Advanced Development, whatever. There's potentially leads here, but I mean, submitting an FOI, say now in what are we, the middle of 2019, may not generate records, if at all, till 2020, 2021, 2022. So it's painfully slow. And the other thing is the potential for records to come out that are just covered in black ink, as in like very significant redaction.
Sure,
the chances of that are actually quite high. Like the only thing we've got going for it is that this is quite old, and obviously, as time goes on, records don't necessarily warrant the classification that they used to have. Sometimes what they do, which is it is a good thing, they do this a lot with me with Northcom and Stratcom, the US Strategic Command and Northern Command, is what they do is they'll essentially release completely redacted records, or records that really the best stuff is blacked out. But then they'll tell you that this document is due for another review in 8 years or 10 years or whatever. And so they're effectively saying, like this document right now is classified, say secret, but it's due for a downgrading in a certain time. It might be an instruction or a manual or a pamphlet or a piece of budgetary or fiscal information, line items, memorandums of understanding, command directives, whatever, and sometimes I've certainly got one US Strategic Command instruction that relates to space surveillance, and it does say that it is due for downgrading from secret to, you hope, unclassified. It's due for downgrading. I think it was 2027. So there is a possibility that in the long-term future we may get some action on this. Yeah.
Looking at this, it seems to me again that somebody has basically got to get hold of Wilson and hey, do you know where you were on such and such a date, whatever the meeting date? I don't have it memorized off the top of my head. Or were you in Vegas? If he wasn't, that presents a real problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. Well, it does. Well, I mean, has anyone? I don't know from down here, but has anyone tried? Do you know of anyone who's trying to get onto Admiral Wilson like currently?
I do not. No, it's again, this kind of dropped and picked up the ball over the weekend. We were originally talking to Michael about him coming on Sunday, and we were thinking about doing that, but I really wanted to follow up and see if I could make direct contact with Commander Wilson, and he did return my call Monday, just as I was heading out to work, so I didn't really have a lot of time to chat, but, obviously wanted the opportunity to follow up, and then Chant went ahead and did that yesterday, and then we did the show with Michael. So really, you gotta take care of business in your normal life, and haven't had the chance to do that too much. But,
Yeah.
I also think we've raised some pretty fair questions. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities here. Again, that there's some real truth behind the docs, even if the docs are fabricated. That's always a possibility. And from having looked at the old Majestic 12 docs, that's what kind of got me interested in this field in the first place.
Sure.
You can find things out. There is interesting information there, even if it's presented in sort of a fictionalized scenario, that are actionable and that are useful. And that's why I'm not saying, oh, I debunked these docs and they're useless and they're crap. I'm not saying, I'm saying just the opposite of that. This is what we found out so far, and keep looking,
Yeah.
And then,
yeah,
of course, I
yeah.
had to turn around and get ready and do this show with you tonight, too. So
Yeah.
there's that, So I haven't had a whole lot of time. But again, there's other people out there. We're not the only UFO researchers in the world. Let some other people try to run some of this stuff down. But as it stands now, from looking at the past known Afosi fakes, they're really well researched, And another thing that I think is important is that it's always a lot easier to do your research in this day and age with an internet, where you can generate some names and what their positions were and all that. It seems to me that these documents were generated during that time frame as compared when the Majestic 12 documents were generated, and that actually required some real footwork, doing some either going directly to or hiring somebody to go to the Truman Library and find that date when Forrestal and the fellow who started Raytheon, Bush, met with Truman. That's
Sure.
kind of like a key tie-in to make them seem legit. Again, I don't think they are. I don't. You're on the same page with me or not on that?
I am.
Yeah. So they research this stuff pretty well, and when you're able to do some research on the internet, it makes things a hell of a lot easier to concoct things.
Yeah. I know. It just seems we just keep coming back to this, that these documents that have difficult provenance, they appear in people's mailboxes, or they appear, burnt, or they appear on websites that are riddled with viruses and stuff. Like, it's just, I don't know. Like, like the bottom line is, I think at the end, the implication is, of course, is that there is been retrieved alien hardware, or retrieved extraterrestrial hardware, or hardware that's not American anyway, and that trying to reverse engineer it and so on. My prediction is just like with everything else, in 12 months or 5 years' time, that there is going to be no sudden flooding of crashed space vehicle technology. There's going to be no outpouring of highly classified records from the Office of the Secretary of Defense. There's going to be no deathbed confession from, say, Admiral Miller if he happens to pass away. There's going to be no New York Times article that delves into the DIA's history. There's going to be no successful FOI requests that confirm all of this. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, but there's still enough in that document that there's stuff to follow up on.
Yeah.
There's stuff to follow up on.
Yeah, there's heaps to follow up. So I don't know. I think that it'll twist and turn. Someone really needs to get onto Admiral Miller, I suppose. I don't know if he would be taking calls like this. I don't know. I mean, how would you even get onto him? Billy Cox might have the best chance. I don't know.
Yeah, Billy wrote an article today where he was sort of following up on all this. And let's see. I don't know if he really adds any. I'm looking at it right now. I don't know that he necessarily adds to it. He goes back over his old story because this story came out as a result of a meeting that did happen. Nobody questions that it happened, including Wilson himself from back in the day. And it got out that, the scenario that's put in print was basically discussed a number of years ago. And Cox followed up with him, and Wilson denied it. So there was that back at that point. But now, again, you've got Wilson in a particular location on a particular day, and that's a lead. That's worth following up on. It seems to me, anyway.
Yeah.
Whether I do it or not, I don't know. But someone should do it. I don't know. So, all right, we done with this? We want to move on to some more NORAD stuff, or you got some more NORAD stuff since you were on with us last. So, why don't you tell us all about that?
Well, it's sort of I do. There's a I probably should introduce this like this. The United States Air Force in an operational setting, so that's in the field, on the bases, in the sky, the US Air Force, like members of the US Air Force, have to, especially communications officers, base commanders, deputy base commanders, pilot leads, base executive officers, and so on. They have to be able to report things up the chain of command. And I don't mean things like the results of surveys and audits. I don't mean things like, the missing money. I don't mean things like that. I mean stuff that's up to date, happening now, such as outbreaks of flu, the loss of actual material, things falling off planes, an active shooter. They have to be able, that they need to evacuate a base, whatever. They have to be able to report things. An oncoming hurricane, it could be anything. And one of the documents, one of the pieces of, I suppose, encoded rules or doctrine that lays out how Air Force bases and how Air Force officers actually report things. It's a document. I mean, it's one of a few, but there's a good document. It's called Air Force Instruction 10-206, and the actual title of it is called Operational Reporting. And this particular it's been going for a long time. This particular piece of doctrine's been going since 1995, I think, and it just gets amended and updated all the time. But the one of the types of reports, and I've talked about a lot about this before, one of the types of reports is called an OPREP 3, and an OPREP 3. Even back to the 60s, an OPREP, and especially now, an OPREP 3 is considered a serious incident or a serious event report, and it's kind of like a miscellaneous report. Overall, it certainly used to be like a miscellaneous report for anything that was developing very, very quickly, that was of dire concern to local commanders, was potentially going to be very embarrassing or very costly in terms of lives or financially or whatever. And
just to jump in, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but when we had Kevin Day on the show, I think it was very late last year, and he is the radar operator on the Princeton during the Tic Tac case. He had mentioned that he at least considered filing an OPREP 3 report. He didn't do it, but he said he thought about it. So there's that little aside there.
Yeah, now that would be actually a pretty good situation. When I say the Air Force have OPREP 3s, it's actually all branches of the military now use the OPREP 3 reporting channel. It's literally it's like an actual reporting channel that's already embedded. You just simply have to the computer you would simply select OPREP. That's not something you want to do. I actually asked a base executive officer for Kings Bay Naval Station, which I think it's in Georgia or somewhere like that. I actually asked him, "Have you ever sent an OPREP 3?" And he said, "No way." And I said, why? And he said, because you're in a lot of trouble. Like if you're submitting an OPREP 3, he said, look, we practice them all the time. But he said, I've never personally sent one. He said, I've never seen one sent. And anyway, so the Army...
Sorry, I hate to interrupt, but also another little aside, I was actually reading an article about sexual harassment in the military, and that is a channel for that as well. Not anything close to... It's kind of a catch-all for anything that really needs to get addressed.
Yeah, it is. It is a catch-all. It certainly used to be, and this is what. Well, it is a catch-all. There is actually a number of there's a number of documents that lay out the sort of things that an OPREP 3 should include, and sometimes they're as simple as anything of major concern to an installation that requires major command assistance or reporting and blah blah blah. So it is something serious, but there are different, when you get into it, there are different categories. Certainly within the Air Force, there are different categories of OPREP 3s. There's loss reports, there's cyber attack reports, and so on. But the current Air Force operational reporting instruction, it runs at say 100 pages or whatever. It doesn't actually have it doesn't actually really have the different classes or categories of OPREP 3s that can be sent, because they are contained in like an attachment, like an enclosure document. And we didn't. It's actually called an OPREP 3 matrix, or in the case of the current Air Force, it's called a Chief of Staff of the Air Force OPREP 3 reporting matrix. And as far as we know, no one in the UFO field or just generally has a copy of this particular 15-page matrix. It just lays out all the different types of OPREP 3 reportings, and I think sexual harassment is one of them. There's active shooter, there's cyber attack, there's emergency evacuation, there's loss of a nuclear warhead, and so on. And the thing is that if you read the OPREP 3 manual, it says that all OPREP 3s have to go to somewhere called the Air Force Service Watch Cell. And we hadn't seen that. I mean, we knew that OPREP 3 reports go to the National Military Command Center. They go to the nearest major commands. They can go to the CIA. They can go to the White House. They can go to the numbered air forces like 8th Air Force or 15th Air Force or whatever. But we had never really me and a friend. I've got a colleague in England called David Carmichael. We'd sort of forgotten that this Air Force Service Watch Cell actually was on the distribution list for all Air Force OPREP 3s. So on the let's see, I think it was it was the 16th of May 2017. My friend David Carmichael, he submitted an FOI request to the headquarters of the United States Air Force for the most recent copy, or one, and I'm quoting here, the most recent copy or one that is deemed releasable of the Chief of Staff of the Air Force OPREP 3 reports matrix. Anyway, 9 months later, it was the end of February, David Carmichael finally got an answer. He got a reply from the Secretary of the Air Force. And they actually said, that's fine, you can have a copy, it's unclassified. And her exact words were, in response to your FOI request for the Chief of Air Staff OPREP 3 reports matrix, the Air Force Airspace and Information Operations Area Air Force Watch Cell determined that the attached documents to be responsive to your request. And so out comes a 15-page list, essentially a huge table of the types of these very serious reports that can be sent. And like I said, there's everything in there: a loss of nuclear warhead, a sudden disruption to electrical activity on a base, and then curiously, on page I think it was page 9, there was two categories or subcategories of OPREP 3 that I looked at them and we both looked at them, and there is absolutely no question that both of them could generate UFO reports. And in fact, the second one is particularly likely, and in the past, the same wording was used and actually was used for UFO reports. It was so I'll go through the first one. Its rule, or its OPREP 3 category, is 9B, and it's called, the title of it is called Unauthorized Vehicle, Military Installation, Airspace Violation or Intrusion. And it actually says that the description of this particular OPREP 3 for commanders, it says, Any confirmed unauthorized civilian small unmanned aircraft system, remotely piloted aircraft, unmanned aerial vehicle, gyrocopter, or similar craft positioned over any Department of Defense mission activity, facility, asset, installation, ships, convoys, etc. The report will include, at minimum, description of aerial object or device, the color of it, identifying markings, actual size, manufacturer, distance from observer, blah, 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 goes on. Then it says, also as applicable, any event, such as an exercise, an inspection, etc., that was in progress at the time of the reported observation. Finally, it says, note, units will send initial OPREP 3 report to Air Force Service Watch Cell within 1 hour of confirmed UA sighting, and final report, if applicable, within 3 hours after the event or incident. So here you've got, it's quite obvious what this is for. This is for pesky drones or threatening unmanned aerial systems that are hovering over bases, hovering near planes, taking on and off. Now they could be completely innocuous, just a bunch of kids playing with a remote control plane, right through to a serious open like foreign or terrorist actions to take photographs of a sensitive base or overflight to disrupt flights or jam communications or listen in on communications. Now, and that's fine. That's probably what it is for. There's nothing about this that screams at me that it's a secret, a little channel to report UFO sightings. However, imagine you're on a base or you're near a convoy of Air Force trucks, or you're near some sort of Air Force installation or a rocket range or whatever, and it's sunset. And there's something in the sky, you immediately think, well, it's making a little bit of noise, it's not a plane, whatever. You report it as an OPREP 3. You don't actually know what it is. I mean, if it's got rotors on it and it's got some markings and a camera, it's obviously a drone. But my contention is that this type of report could generate UFO sightings, especially if the report is sent up the chain of command to the Air Force Service Watch Cell very rapidly. If everything's done in a hurry, there could be, if we were able to go through all these OPREP 3s, there could be some really serious UFO reports in there. So that's the first one that I found, but the next one is actually quite a bit more important. It's rule code is 9F, and its description is vital intelligence sightings / intel reports, and its descriptor says A, any or all unidentifiable, suspicious or hostile traffic, that means land, aerospace or sea, which because of its nature, course or actions may constitute a threat to security of the US and Canada, includes reports from airborne platforms. B, a receipt of significant intelligence received through other intel channels. Now, the wording of this is really interesting. The title, which is Vital Intelligence Sightings and Intel Reports, it matches a very old type of UFO report that has been around since 1954, and that's the old service reporting. And the old service reporting, of course, it stood for the communications. Hold on, you'd think I'd know this. The communications instructions for reporting of vital intelligence sightings. That's exactly what is in the current OPREP 3 matrix. So what I'm saying is from really 1954 well into the 80s, America and Canada promulgated a manual called JNAP 146, and it had within it these service reportings for pilots and other members of the armed forces to report so-called vital intelligence sightings, and they included, right back in the doctrine back then in the rule book, they included missiles, anything threatening the United States in the form of like bombers or suspicious air contrail submarines, but right in there traditionally has always been the word UFO, unidentified flying objects. So we're seeing not only the title of this current 2017 era OPREP 3 matrix, we're seeing the term vital intelligence sightings now, and that exact term goes back to the traditional UFO or unknown object reporting procedures of the past. Listeners, I mean, this is a bit of a footnote, but service reporting, the traditional service reporting, was actually removed from Air Force operational reporting doctrine in 2011, and it appears it simply moved. It simply moved to the OPREP 3 report matrix, which has been an article that we've only just, like I was saying, FOI'd now. So this is really interesting. So obviously the thing we can do from here is, which is what I did straight away, is the smart thing to do was obviously the Air Force Service Watch Cell at Headquarters Air Force, which is part of the National Military Command Centre. They receive all OPREP 3s from all Air Force installations and communication systems. And so my first thing to do was obviously, if they've got these two categories of OPREP 3s, which ask for unidentified things, unidentified intelligence sightings, weird stuff that flies, whatever, above bases or near planes or whatever, my first thing was to immediately ask the Air Force for copies of any OPREP 3s that have been reported like that. And so what I actually wrote, I mean, it's pretty long-winded, but I submitted an FOI request to Headquarters US Air Force for, and I quote, electronic or hard copy records of OPREP 3 reports submitted from the field, bases, commanders, etc., to or through the Air Force Service Watch Cell. This cell may now be known as Air Force Watch, because I think I saw that the name had changed. Then I've written, but either way, it is the locale where incoming OPREP 3s come in, blah, blah, blah. And I've asked for any 9B or 9F category OPREP 3s that would include keywords like unidentified aircraft, UFO, unusual aircraft, low-flying aircraft, etc. So, and again, with FOI, it could be 2 years before we get an answer. Maybe a whole lot of documents will come out. Yeah.
Okay, and so let me ask you this. The Unidentified show has come out. Now, you're down in Australia, so have you had a chance to watch it yet, the first couple episodes?
Yeah, there is a way we can watch it.
Okay.
It's a little bit jumpy. I think it comes through a service from somewhere in Eastern Europe. It's obviously not legitimate, but I have seen the first two episodes, and yeah, they could. There's so many documentary series or individual documentaries or whatever that have royally screwed up, missed the boat. They've quoted completely superseded people or people who are a little marginal or whatever. But this one is actually, compared to most of the stuff that's come out in the last whatever years, the Unidentified series is actually pretty good. I think, to their credit, they're actually trying to do something very different. It's something that individually no UFO research could have done. I mean, to do what they've done in a reasonable quick time is really good. They're approaching this from a slightly different angle, and obviously when the Navy are involved and when current, not just retired, but current naval serving officers are involved, that's a very, very serious break from the standard fare. I mean, most UFO documentaries are quoting people that left military commands or left the aviation community, 10, 20, 30 years ago. And we've got a situation where current people or very recently retired people who are sort of somewhat unpolluted, they've been quoted, and I think that the people involved are actually quite truthful. I mean, there's a lot of ads and there's a lot of driving around and pictures of Tom DeLonge with his rucksack on and all this sort of stuff. But I mean, it's a show. I mean, there's an element of, they can't just bombard, especially for listeners who are seriously, they know very, very little about the UFO topic. They're not obviously just going to be able to bombard people with military witness after military witness and images of documents and pictures of the Pentagon. You can't just do that for non-stop. But I think overall it's actually pretty good. I'm not a very good person at reviewing this sort of stuff. I know that there's people who will look at this completely differently from I, and I'm down here. It's a little harder. But yeah, I have seen it. Have you had a chance to watch it?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I watched a couple of them. Now, one point I want to make, because I was a little critical of this in the second episode, where there was a little bit of a road trip to Catalina Island. I thought, well, what's the point of this? But I'm told that there's going to be a little bit of a payoff to all that in the next episode. So we will see on Friday night, and I guess you'll see whatever you get around to it. But yeah, I'll be watching it live, so of course I'm all over it. Absolutely. And, so far so good. I mean, it's great to see. It's great to see guys we've had here on the show talking to Lou Elizondo and Tom DeLong, and so far I've been into it. There haven't been any real great revelations. Getting to see the lady pilot on the first show was really unexpected. It was a nice little coup for them because the word had always been that she was never going to come forward in any way, shape, or form. She hasn't exactly come forward, but going on camera and doing that interview, it was quite a little coup for them. It was very effective. So yeah, so far so good. I'm liking this show. And the nice thing about it is they're not going to be able to go. They're just not going to have the time to go into the sort of the insane geek detail that we all want. No. So that gives us a lot of opportunity to sort of dig in and work around the margins and gin up some new stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I do know something. Well, I think this is right, but I do believe that in future episodes that one of Lou Elizondo's subordinates is going to be on. Right, that's something that's completely new. I'm also now with the witnesses to the so-called 2014-15 Atlantic Coast events. I know that that one of the people on last week or the week the episode that just passed, episode 2, and who's been quoted in the media. I can't remember his name, but
Graves is one of them, and Graves recall.
Is one of them. Now, I haven't been able to ascertain, is he still actually serving with the United States Navy?
I believe so. I could look that up pretty quick, but I believe he is still active.
Yep, and that's I was told actually some time ago that they will be that they will be featuring actual active duty people, and that certainly is. I mean, how many times can you go back through history and actually see documentaries where a serving member of, say, the Federal Aviation Administration or an airport or indeed a military officer or staffer is actually allowed to be interviewed comfortably and given some time to talk. I mean, you go right back to, say, the so-called Washington overflights of 52 when Al Chop and Rappelt and various others were seen, on TV. That's one of the only times I really can't think of many occasions where a serving member of the armed forces or the intelligence community or the aviation community has been put on camera and they've been apparently completely fine with it. It's just not something that seems to be done very often. So I thought that was pretty good. Yeah.
Steve Bassett was on with us a couple weeks ago now, and going back and forth with him a little bit. It seems obvious to me there's an inside team that the TTSA still has. They've got contacts still on the inside, obviously, and they're getting a lot of this stuff done that way. Is that about your view on things, or you have a different opinion?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. There's I do know that. Well, I mean, I know as best as I can that the TTSA group and any interested parties like say congressmen or senators, retired senators or whatever, are working actively within the Department of Defense. And maybe even the aviation community, maybe with the Secretary of the Navy, there are certainly people absolutely right now at admiral level or captain level or current congressmen who are showing an interest in this, who have actually given this some time. There is that if you think what's been done already, say in 2017, 2016, 2018, from John Podesta to Tom DeLong to Elizondo's retirement to the involvement with Bigelow to Senator Reid to whatever, there's been, I mean, that's all stuff that we had no idea about, and so you can only assume, I mean, that this would just not stop. I mean, obviously right now it's very safe, and I do know so as best I can, it's very safe to assume that it's actually probably growing. I mean, there is no way they are going to have active naval personnel plus the New York Times article and the Politico articles and every other article in the news. There is no way that that the Navy internally are not discussing this issue with interested parties, and be they TTSA or senators or congressmen or inspector generals, or I don't know how you say this, but adjunct generals. I don't know if that's the right word. So I think it's all mostly very positive.
And it seems to be very Navy-centric, not too much from the Air Force. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. The Air Force, I do. The Air Force are deafening by their silence. Even the Army, but particularly the Air Force. This is my personal view from 20 years of study and 20 years of reading declassified or publicly available information from aviation journals or military journals or thesis dissertations. You'd be amazed what is found in thesis dissertations from like the Air University or various air institutes, even Naval War College, whatever. You'd be amazed what you can actually find in people's educational output. So theses, master's theses, test results, that sort of thing. And the Air Force, personally, to me, I think that the best so-called UFO data, or certainly data on unknown or stray or unexpected or unidentifiable craft or aircraft, the best data is housed with North American Aerospace Defense Command within their various combat operations cells within their what they call the NORAD J33C area, which is the NORAD's Directorate of Operations, Aerospace Operations, Airspace Management Branch, NORAD's interagency liaison cells with the Federal Aviation Administration, then the Air Force Space Command's 21st Space Wing's 21st Operations Group data from the Ballistic Missile Early Warning System. So much of this say radar data and optical camera data goes back to either the United States Air Force or it goes back to NORAD-dominated Air Force, because NORAD is mostly staffed by Air Forces. They mostly, by Air Force officers, I should say, and NORAD are mostly, they work mostly in conjunction with the Air Force. It's the Air Force that scramble jets for unknown objects through NORAD. NORAD vector the jets in to the unknown object, but it's the United States Air Force that are actually flying the planes. That sort of relationship is why I call NORAD the Air Force dominated, and that is where. That is obviously where some of the most sensitive real-time data is stored or analysed. That is where it's no secret that the Air Force have had a very, very long history of UFO involvement, more so than, say, the Army or the Marine Corps or even the Navy, more so than, I believe, the intelligence community. It's to me, it's Air Force all the way. That's just my opinion.
Oh, okay, and just asking you to speculate wildly based on your 20 years experience. What I'm thinking is maybe this is kind of a slow rollout, and the reason the Navy is sort of up front at the moment is because their information is fewer and further between than the Air Force. And if the Air Force came out and did essentially what the Navy's doing now, I mean, all hell would break loose.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know. I think. If the Air Force, I think it would be far more impactful if the Air Force came out with even just a significant number of modern day pilot sightings. Forget all the NORAD space tracking data and aerospace like detection, aerospace warning data. Forget all the radar track files, the weird sightings by Air Force pilots. The weird displays they have of stuff. That if the Air Force just alone started talking openly about pilot sightings, I think that would be very, very tough for some generals to stomach. I don't know. I wish we had more inside information, I guess you could say.
Sure. We all do.
But one thing that one of the people I respect most in ufology is a guy called Barry Greenwood, who's in Boston, and he's
probably
certainly
watching Game 7 of the finals tonight because his Bruins are.
I told he will be, and he'll have this. He'll be listening to me this talk right now, but on the side. But he said something incredibly insightful once. For those that don't know, Barry is an archivist. He's certainly got, we think, certainly the largest individual for one person in their home, the largest collection of UFO material in the world. It's only dwarfed by places like the Center for UFO Studies at CUFOS in Chicago and so on. But Barry famously wrote a book in 1984 with a co-author, Lawrence Fawcett, called Clear Intent. He published over 50 newsletters under the name Just Cause, which solely dealt with government UFO information. And Barry's I think 67 now, and he's been doing this since his 20s, and he's very objective, he's very quiet, he's very sensible, and he said to me once, this topic moves incredibly slowly. And I said, oh yeah, that's nice, whatever. And then he said, I'll put it another way. He said, slow defines the UFO topic. Slow defines the UFO topic. And it does seem that things are, you have to wait 20 years before a particular pilot comes forward. You have to wait 15 years before some document is redacted. You have to wait 15 years before some some old newspaper goes online from the 50s to get some newspaper article you desperately want. It is even just to scan things, like Barry and others scan documents or records, newspaper articles, ship logs, whatever, and even that is incredibly slow. I mean, the internet has sped everything up, and that's fine, but we're still dealing with a mismatch of different ideas and different opinions and anecdotes and facts and opinions and yeah, so I mean, even some people take 10 years to publish their one and only UFO book. So this is not a dynamic. It's better now, but it's not what you call a very dynamic topic.
Yeah, I was going to say it is better now because things are picking up. I know I can't keep up with it all. I can't. So, and that's good. It's good. It keeps me out of trouble, and gives lots of people lots of things to do. And I know you're one of those guys. Anything hot you're working on right at the moment you can share a little bit about?
Yeah, sure. So this is really bizarre. Okay, so there's the United States Air Force. The 21st Operations Group, they run there are three bases around the world that they have control over, and one's in Alaska, one's in Greenland, and one's actually in England. And they form something called the Ballistic Missile Early Warning System, or BMEWS. And the job of the Ballistic Missile Early Warning System is it constantly scans the sky for submarine launch. The implication is Russian, maybe Chinese, but they constantly scan out into space, across the poles and out into the Atlantic and so on. They scan the skies for submarine launched ballistic missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and they've got the secondary mission of these sites is low Earth space surveillance, so tracking low Earth satellites up to 600 k's into space. So they've really got two missions. But anyway, the facility like I said, there's three ballistic missile early warning system centres. One is in England, it's in Yorkshire, and it's called Fylingdales. It's called RAF Fylingdales, Royal Air Force Fylingdales. And although the rules and what they do is governed by the US Air Force, it's actually manned by like English airmen. It's manned by it's sort of administered by the English. It's on British land, so it's very much a joint or combined effort. Anyway, as part of a slightly wider effort, I actually sent a Freedom of Information request to the British Ministry of Defence for a day's worth of uncorrelated or unknown track data. Like basically I wanted potentially, I've seen this sort of data before from the other sites or from other similar sites in America. So I essentially asked them for tabulated data or alert data of any unknown objects or aircraft or whatever the huge radar system at Fylingdales picked up, say, in a 24-hour period, in any random 24-hour period. And I didn't mention UFOs. I didn't even necessarily mention unknown objects. I actually used their terms like uncorrelated targets and airborne alerts and so on. And they came back to me and they said that, we've accepted your FOI request. Bear in mind, this is an international effort. We're going to have to go to the Americans. This is going to be very slow, blah, 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 blah. And they said that there's an enormous amount of data, even for 1 day's worth of data. They must pick up every raindrop and everything in space and whatever.
Sure.
Anyway, they came back to me, and in one of the lines, it's quite funny. I'm not reading anything into this, but it's just a funny little anecdote. In one of the lines, just in that very first acknowledgement of my FOI request, the officer in Britain said something, I haven't got it in front of me, but something along the lines of, bear in mind, the British Ministry of Defence does not have any opinion on extraterrestrial activities in our airspace or anything about UFOs from an extraterrestrial angle or whatever it said. So even in their first letter, they've automatically assumed that I'm a UFO buff.
Well, they were right about that.
Well, they're right about that. That's the funny thing, they're right. But I didn't ask. I didn't use the word UFO. Right. I certainly didn't use the word extraterrestrial or alien. But in their I was asking them essentially for missile warning data, like actual track data for a day, uncorrelated space surveillance data, whatever, satellite warning, space warning data, anything that they picked up in the form of moving aircraft, whatever. That's what I'm using their terms. That's in open doctrine, like on their websites and so on. I'm using their terms. I'm not saying anything about ET. And then they've come back to me very first, or certainly, definitely, I think it might have been this second acknowledgement, but it was certainly the first or second acknowledgement. They said to me, bear in mind, we don't do extraterrestrials, we don't do classic UFOs. And that was, I'm just reading this thinking, either they've just jumped to a massive, either they're hiding something, which it wouldn't be that obvious, they wouldn't be that silly, or they've just jumped to that conclusion because they've had so many people come to them before, or the other potential is that they've looked me up just by curiosity and said, they've said maybe
Google Paul Dean UFO. Yeah, he's our guy.
yeah. No, it's possible. They might. I mean, if they do get a receipt, I mean, this I do know because there was subsequent. This is what I'm going to write my next blog about because there was very significant communications. I actually fought the MOD for 2 years for this data, and I could actually revisit it now and keep fighting.
Sure.
But I'd have to actually go to the Americans jointly as well. It's really complex, and it's just not worth it. They're not going to release. They're simply not going to release alert and missile and uncorrelated target data from such a sensitive site. I mean, even the RAF Fylingdales site, which RAF Fylingdales consumes £20 million a year from the British, an unclassified amount of money from the Americans. It's an incredibly sensitive site. It's an absolute tier 1 nuclear target for Russia. It's absolutely sodden with security measures. Right, even the Fylingdales website is literally like, you read it and it just takes 2 minutes to read. It's like there is nothing there. I mean, the only best information you can get about Fylingdales, really, most of it dates back to the 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s when it was being built, and so it's obviously it's obviously an absolute, like, it's a jewel in the crown of missile defense and space warning. There's no question about that. I mean, even in classified NORAD histories that mention Fylingdales, there's literally only 1 or 2 sentences. When other sites, they talk, for 2 hours or for 2 pages or 20 pages about very sensitive radar sites. This thing barely gets mentioned. So they're obviously not going to release anything that's current. But it was certainly an experiment. Yeah. Got it. So there you go.
All righty. So you got anything else for us, or you want to wrap up, or?
Christ, I don't know. I've got heaps of blogs coming out about with freedom. No, there's just slow burn stuff. I can tell you one thing. I mentioned before Barry Greenwood published, him and others, Larry Bryant, Todd Zeckler, etc. They published a newsletter called Just Cause newsletter, and it went from 1977 to 1996, I think, and there was 72 editions overall, and Barry was involved in publishing about 50 of them. He was a sub-editor sort of thing. And anyway, here's a tidbit. One of those editions, I think it was like it might have been edition 4 or 6 or something like that. It was the NSA, the National Security Agency, actually obtained a copy of it, and internally they classified it top secret. No shit. So imagine a public newsletter that's sent to 200 readers. It's a private newsletter. It's as if I've chucked a newsletter together and sent it to my friends. Right. The NSA got a copy, and they actually, working with the FBI. So the FBI and the NSA jointly got a copy of a Just Cause edition, and they considered that it had within it information that was considered, and I quote, top secret. And I've actually got actual FBI. I've got 2 pages of FBI material from 1978 that actually say that.
Atta guy Barry. His Bruins are down 2-0 right at the moment, but a little bit more than halfway through the game, so he might be having a long, tough night. But now, is Barry still working the fields, or is he pretty much backed away, or he's still out there doing? All right. So, Paul, it was great having you on again, and we will be in touch. And obviously a lot going on, and you never know what's going to come up next. You just never know. Yeah. So keep your nose to the grindstone, and I appreciate it. And everybody, thanks for listening. Next show that we've got on the schedule, Steve Bassett is going to be back on with us Sunday, and we've got quite a few other things lined up. I'll have to go look them up. I can't remember them all, but Steve had some technical difficulties last Sunday and wasn't able to make it, so we'll have him on Sunday, and I know he's got a lot more drama, more craziness, and hopefully some good stuff in there too. So good night, everybody. Have a good night. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Bye.